Speedbird 851, turn right, heading 180. Order 14 Papa, turn right 245, report localizer established 27.
Hello everyone, welcome back to DJ's Aviation. When an airline places an order for any aircraft, it usually is quite a big commitment and can be worth millions to hundreds of millions or even in the billions. Often the order highlights the faith a particular carrier has in an aircraft. So on many occasions when an airline cancels a big order, we are left questioning as to why. Sometimes it is very clear, and sometimes it isn't. Earlier this year, after much debate and prolonging, Virgin Atlantic officially announced the cancellation of their A380 order. The analysis today is on that exact carrier. I'll outline why exactly they cancelled their Airbus A380 order. The A380 is a 4-engine double-decker airplane, and Virgin Atlantic officially signed for it back in 2001. This therefore made them one of the first customers for the Airbus A380. The airline had ordered just 6 of the A380s, and they were on order for 17 years. And 17 years later, it was noted that they'd cancelled their 6 A380s. This was completed in the first 2 months of 2018, and this cancellation was the latest setback in those 17 years that led up to it, with multiple delays in the delivery. We begin this analysis with market demand, something that is always important in this ever-growing aviation industry. While the industry is growing and demand for flights and specific routes, especially on the Virgin Atlantic network, is ever-growing, operating large aircraft can be deemed as inefficient. At times, is actually also a big risk. The Virgin Atlantic CEO Craig Grieger said in an interview with Air Transport World, "We just can't find enough markets that make sense for an aircraft that big, and it didn't make sense to take just 1 or 2 because of fleet complexity." In the latter part of this quote, taken from Air Transport World, we become aware of the idea of streamlining. Just to clarify, this is highlighted when Craig said, because of fleet complexity. Having a streamlined fleet is something a number of airlines are currently in favour of. A perfect example is Emirates, and the complete opposite could be Delta. These are my go-to examples, as you may be aware, because when taking a look at the fleet lists of the two airlines, while serving certainly different purposes, the Emirates one is far more streamlined, with only a few aircraft variants, but they do have a lot of each. This is something Virgin Atlantic on a whole are going for in the future, with the A350-1000s and 787-9s acting as the airline's flagship. However, in an interview they did say that the A350-1000 would likely be their sole flagship. So when discussing the A350-1000s and the 787-9s, and how I mentioned earlier it took 17 years from the time of ordering to the time of the cancellation, fleet operations change. In fact, some airlines are in and out of the industry within 10 years if operations do fail. It's a long wait and ultimately a big risk, because as we saw with some other A380 customers, your airline can fall under due to many complications. Thankfully, this hasn't occurred for Virgin Atlantic. But it still doesn't mean that they didn't experience times of difficulties, which redefined how they would look forward. In addition, the introduction of the A350 series and the Boeing 787 series gave the airline more options in the twin-engine sector. Ultimately, with a host of new aircraft, it did mean that Virgin Atlantic saw potential elsewhere instead of this 4-engined A380. Singapore Airlines were the first operator of the Airbus A380, if you weren't aware, and while they aren't titled Virgin Atlantic nor located in the United Kingdom, they did in fact have a 49% stake in Virgin Atlantic at the time of the order. This therefore makes it a little bit easier to understand how this order originated. Singapore were huge fans of the A380 and did believe it would play a critical role in the industry, redefining it if you will. However, Singapore sold their share/stake in the airline eventually to Delta. Delta don't operate the Airbus A380 and aren't really huge fans of it. And sure, while the order could have stayed in place, I do wonder if potentially this also played a big role in the carrier announcing its cancellation. Despite all this, when the CEO made it public that the order was officially cancelled, he said to Bloomberg the following: "It was not a particularly difficult call to make. The decision to cancel the A380s has been talked about by many since around 2013, which was meant to be the updated date of delivery. However, as we know, this wasn't met, and it did quickly become apparent that these aircraft would never be joining the fleet. The killer blow, according to many aviation analysts, was when the carrier placed an order for the A350-1000. the stretched A350, which has a higher capacity to the Dash 900. Virgin Atlantic cancelling their A380 order came as not a huge shock to many, but nevertheless I do believe it would have been interesting to see an A380 in the Virgin Atlantic colours, especially during golden hour, as that is when the Virgin Atlantic livery in particular does shine. What do you think though? Do you believe it was the best move possible for the airline, or do you maybe think that Delta had quite a big say in the future of that very A380 order, considering they weren't huge fans of it? I'd honestly say it was a bit of both. Probably the A350-1000 did play a big part, but also Singapore selling their stake would have certainly had another impact. I'd like to thank you very much for watching this video of mine, and I do hope you did enjoy it. I also hope that maybe you learnt something about this whole Virgin Atlantic A380 cancellation. If you did enjoy, feel free to drop the video a like, and of course subscribe to the channel if you're new to see very similar videos. I do look forward to you all joining me in the next one.
Dreams in flight, and we'll fly.